You have that to say, this is my brand. This is how I speak. These are the topics we jump into. There should absolutely be some sort of like biblical text or totem here that everyone in the organization can come back to. Keep in mind, if they're not empowered to do that, if they don't have that information, you are limiting how well you can scale your business because you can't do everything. You only have 24 hours in a day.
Hello, and welcome to the Master the Media podcast. I'm here today with a very special guest, Jonathan Jacobs, who is Master the Media's marketing instructor. So that means he instructs our students on the very fun categories of niching and ideal customer avatars. Don't worry if you have no idea what I'm talking about. That's what we're going to talk about today. Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, Amy. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me on again. I've so loved being a part of this program over the past, I think it's been maybe 3 or 4 years now, and always excited to chat with you.
Oh, we love having you. And it's so wild. Like, I met Jonathan at a speaking engagement I was doing, and he
That's
was
right.
working, and he was like, "Hey, Amy, we have to talk." And then that's what talking evolved into, was like, "Oh, Jonathan, you are a master marketer." Um, so let me quickly introduce Jonathan, and then I'll let him give you his spiel. Jonathan Jacobs is an entrepreneur, marketing expert, and storyteller who is actively rethinking American manhood and how men show up in their communities. He has co founded the Digital Natives Group, which is an award winning digital marketing agency that built a track record of success working with a diverse array of brands and thought leaders, including the NFL, Comcast, NBC Universal, the Nature Conservancy, Fortune 500 CEOs, and Nobel Prize winners. Wow. I'm also going to add that Jonathan has marketed 5 Super Bowls, right? And 75 plus best-selling books. So welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you. That guy sounds amazing. I wish I knew him. Can't say I do, but no, it's great to be here. And thank you for sharing all that. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Absolutely. So gosh, I have so much to talk to you about. So honestly, I have always, until like the last few years, I hated the whole like niche concept because
Mm,
it's the hardest part of marketing. And it's often where we see our Master of the Media students struggle the most, but then succeed the most, because you have to get over this like uncomfortable hump, let's call it, to get to the rest of your marketing. So I'm going to, I feel like you could do it a whole lot more justice if you kind of dive into like, why is niching important and why do we have to do
yeah.
this hard soul searching work before we actually
Yeah.
start marketing our businesses?
Right. It's a great question. It's something that I feel like, when we do, I have the pleasure of being reviewing module ones, and when students in our program come through, I feel like sometimes a lot of them will just outright say in the notes, why do I have to do this process? And I get it. It's hard and it feels like a lot and it's time consuming. And I think also within my space of marketing and marketing experts and brand marketers, there is discourse around, is niching even a thing anymore? Do we still need to do this? Why I argue it is useful and why it's important is because even if it's not helping you figure out who your customer is, it's helping you figure out who you are. Because understanding what your niche is helping you understand who you can legitimately speak to, what stories you can tell, what problems you can solve. And when we don't start with that as the foundation for building our brand, sometimes we get to our destination and then we realize that's not the place we were supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think this is so important, is that it helps us go through the process of understanding who we are and what we're trying to achieve. How do we talk about ourselves, right? When you have the moment to do that elevator pitch, when you have a chance to get introduced to a brand, who are you? What do you stand for? Who are you in community with? That's why these things matter. It's not so that someone at the outside knows to look at you and go, oh, they talk to women 40 to 50 who've been diagnosed as pre-diabetic. I should go follow them. It's so that you, when you are creating things, figuring out how to speak, developing presentation materials, developing an identity, I should create with that person in mind.
I love that. And just so you guys know, like, this is the reason that we have in Master of the Media, we have 13 modules. And in module one, our students start with niching. So figuring out like who they're talking to online. And then from there, they go to their ideal customer avatar, which is like that actual person who's like, a woman who's 40 to 50. But Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit more clearly what is niching and what
Yeah.
are ideal customer avatars, because I could throw around these terms, but what are they in like really basic talk?
I think the reality of a niche is that a niche is, who do you serve? It's the answer to that question. Who are you here for? What is the outline of this person and the problem that you solve, and who they are as an individual? What's this community, this population, who your information and solution is uniquely tailored for? They are the early adopters of whatever you're putting into the universe. They are the first people who are going to go cling to that information and jump to it. That's really what that is. And it's important to understand this is a defined population. This is not saying my niche is women, because that's not a niche. That's a huge swath of people.
That's
Something
half
like
of the population.
exactly, right. And like the reality is, if we knew the companies that have maybe reached that many people, you and I could probably sit here and name them, because that's how few and far between they are. So saying you're going to target that isn't useful, because we all have limited resources. We develop a niche so that we can figure out how to best devote our energy and resources towards the groups that are most ready to receive our messages.
I love that. And from there, I actually have two questions for you. So sorry to throw two at once, but can your niche change? Actually, let's just start with that.
Yeah,
Because I feel
absolutely,
like people are
absolutely, it can.
always
Yeah,
scared to lock
yeah,
themselves in.
absolutely. I can, I've used this example before. One of my clients at Digital Natives Group was a neurologist. But when we started, we only talked about neurology through the lens of like Alzheimer's and early onset Alzheimer's and trying to avoid it. That was it. We didn't really talk about even the word dementia, as closely linked with Alzheimer's, obviously, as that is. We didn't talk about Parkinson's. We didn't really talk about ALS. We didn't talk about all these other things that have neurological components to them, because we said this is our thing. If we can own this conversation, we can expand outwards from there, right? But we've built this defensible area that is, we are the expert on this thing, and then we expand our territory from there, right? Like, not that everything is war, but think about it like the board game Risk, right? You try to own a continent, own a territory, build this kind of thing that you can position so that other people can't come for that, and you can grow from that. Then your niche changes. You're the dominant South America player to the dominant Americas player to the dominant Western Hemisphere player, right? Like whatever that thing is. So it absolutely can change over time. And you're not beholden to where you started. You can even shift and move in totally different directions.
I love that. So this basically like when Master of the Media started, we're gonna, teach dietitians specifically how to work with
Mm,
brands. And now we have grown to work with physicians as well,
right.
quite a few of them, and nurse practitioners and nurses and physician associates. And so I'm kind of thinking that's what you mean by first we claimed our stake in the dietitian territory, got known, and
Exactly.
then started
Yeah.
expanding from there.
Exactly. Once people know that you know your shit, once they know that you know what you're doing, you move beyond that first group you worked with. They're your credibility, right? We use them first because there's the least friction. They're the ones who are ready. You have this background, they can relate to you, you know how to talk to them. But now everyone else is seeing, hey, why are these dietitians getting so much attention and awareness? Oh, Amy and Master of the Media knows how to help them get media appearances, or knows how to help them get brand deals. I may be, a gastroenterologist, but I want to learn from that. And so then you start moving outwards from there. They are not going to go, oh, it's only for the dietitians.
I love that. And here's another question, because I think a lot of people get lost here is, can a customer be someone who is not your avatar?
Oh, absolutely. An avatar is never something that you are going public and saying, hello, my name is Jonathan Jacobs, and I am here to serve men 30 to 40 who are trying to lose 10 pounds.
Well, then you
Because
couldn't work with Master the Media because
exactly.
we're mostly women.
Like for so many reasons, it wouldn't make sense. Right. That is not a thing you have to do. It's kind of like how for a lot of companies that I work with that are even let's just go outside health and wellness. When I work with CPG, consumer packaged goods companies, or SaaS companies, we do a lot to develop a brand voice, customer personas. These are not things they then go into their marketing and say, hello, this is how we talk. This is who we are for. No, it's so that internally we have kind of this silhouette of a person to understand and measure everything we're doing against, to go, would this resonate with this person? Would this person see themselves in this? And that's what this process is really about. So that way, when you're putting things out there, it's resonant with that group, but it doesn't mean it's off-putting to anyone else. It doesn't mean if you currently have a patient who is a 65-year-old man and you're trying to serve women who are 30 to 40, with whatever caveats all around that we want to have, it doesn't mean you have to turn that person away. You can continue to serve that population. They're coming to see you. That's totally fine.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, the example I'm thinking of is, we just had a keynote speaker who is not a health professional at all, join Master of the Media. And she actually asked, like, I know I'm not your avatar. Will this work for me? Like, can I still do it? And it's like, of course, like we have to have an
Yeah.
avatar, but this works for anyone who's an expert. And I'm guessing like the same thing if you're, a gut health dietitian who focuses
Right.
on, like you said, women, but like, yes, you could help a man.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, like, even one of my favorite students that we've had in the program, I can't remember his name. I remember he was from Canada, though. He was a physician, I believe, but he was trying to build his platform around transparency in the financial life of
Oh, yeah.
physicians.
Robin.
And that Robin, and that was his
Yeah.
whole thing. And it's like, yeah, he may be a physician, so he's in this category of people who could use our services, but the audience he's trying to build has nothing to do with trying to reach like a patient population. But he gained, from my understanding, he gained a ton of value being in here because what we're teaching people are translatable skills. This is not grounded in only having to understand, like this stuff only doesn't only work for dietitians. These are is a universal process that entrepreneurs, that brand marketers, that business owners go through to just figure out what the hell am I building and who am I building it for?
And how does this relate? So like a lot of like, because we're working with healthcare professionals in Master of the Media, so a lot of the practitioners that come through our doors, they're setting up their avatar and their niche for their private practice or for their, whatever professional capacity they're exercising in.
Mm.
And then I think sometimes they get stuck on how does that have to 100% relate to the way that they work with brands? And so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of room for experimentation, growth, and whatever that might be. So when we work with brands, there's a lot of different ways we can work with brands. They could hire us to create content for their channel. They could hire us to host content on our own channels. Then we could get into email, all these other things we could do, public appearances, etc. What matters, what I will say is the consistent across all of this is that your brand and the brands you're working with should always be values aligned. That's the key thing because that's where trust can be lost is if you start working with a brand, if you say you're an environmentalist and you do a partnership with BP or ExxonMobil, that would be a real dissonant thing for your audience to experience. But you could easily do partnerships with companies that still practice and preach sustainability, waste reduction, etc., even if they speak to a population that's different than the population you serve, because the values alignment is there and your audience will still trust you for that purpose. So I think that the key thing to point out is that you don't only have to work with brands in your vertical, but you do need to make sure you're protecting the integrity of your brand. And then also the elements of your brand that are called upon, again, can vary between whether it's on your channels or their channel. You have a lot more room for experimentation. If Cottonelle is going to hire you to talk about toilet paper on their channel versus if they're going to ask you to create content on your own. So feel free to start to play with some of that flexibility there. Feel free to start testing. Hey, how would it, I know that their social media audience maybe skews younger than who I normally talk to. What would it look like for me to start playing in that environment? And how can I deploy messaging there that might not just uplift Cottonelle and deliver what they've hired me for, but also pull people into my ecosystem so that I could start to expand my territory a little bit.
I think that's incredibly well said. And that actually makes me think of one of our graduates and instructors, Katie Hadley, because her niche is she's a gut health dietitian, but by practice, she's a vegan and, like very into plant-based eating. And so she's done partnerships with supplement companies that are, make gut health supplements. And then she's done partnerships with food companies that make vegan foods, although she doesn't, I wouldn't say like her patient that she sees every day is like focused on plant-based eating, but it still
Yeah.
works because it hits
Okay.
all the points.
Absolutely. I'll give you an even more crazy, a little bit crazy version, maybe your
Yeah.
audience will feel. But so, outside of this work, I do a lot of work in men's spaces, working on rethinking and redefining masculinity. A lot of my peers end up doing brand collaborations with sexual health and wellness brands that target women. They're selling, whether it's lube, vibrators, et cetera, any number of products. And you might look at that and go, well, they're trying to talk to men. Yes, but some of them have a very significant female portion of their audience, whether it's a minority or a majority, varies. And also, those brands' values in terms of like the egalitarian nature of pleasure and the equity of pleasure and the diversity of pleasure is directly in line with what they try to talk to their male audiences about. So that's why you'll see something like that and go, but does that take away? No, it uplifts what they're doing and further affirms the things that they stand for and what they're trying to say.
I'm gonna get actually that made me think of one more example. So and this partnership didn't end up working out, but years ago, a pork company came to me and said like, hey, we're interested in talking about a partnership. And I'm a plant-based dietitian. Like
Mm,
I eat fish, but I'm otherwise like, plant-based. And I could have been like, that's crazy. But what they actually wanted to talk about was the fact that I am one person in a household that eats varied things. And like my husband eats pork, he eats beef, he eats chicken, he eats turkey. I don't. And so the campaign that we were talking about was how to execute this shared
mm.
environment of different food preferences. So it was very interesting. And it actually did relate to my audience of plant-based eaters because we were still talking about plant-based eating in that household concept.
Mm. Oh, that's great. Yeah, of course. Yeah, get inventive. There's so many great ways to make that work.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, now that we've talked about like all the things of why this matters and the kind of, how it, what the rules are. I think people, it's kind of like, do you have to create your niche before you start on social media? Do you have to create
Right.
your niche before you open up, a private practice or start working with brands or start a website? What are the rules here?
Yeah, so I would say, listen, I think first of all, don't ever let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There is no better day to start than today. Of course, tomorrow also works, but today is the best, right? Tomorrow's the second best. So I would say never let that happen. However, do not go too far without creating that initially, right? We only get one chance to make a first impression, and you want to make sure you've kind of figured that out when you get started. What I would encourage you to do is think about it. You want to have the silhouette before you start doing things, but you don't necessarily have to color it in, would be the way I would encourage you to think about experimentation. Have a rough idea, but then allow yourself to play with trying different things before you then start to solidify the final definition of what that niche or community might be. Can you start working with brands? Absolutely, right? If you have something valuable to say, you can already start sharing that media kit out. There are plenty of people that you might consider an influencer who don't actually even manage their own social media, but they have such a strong set of credentials. They have a really well put together media kit. They have a really well defined population they feel they can speak to, that they're able to generate those things. So, no, you don't have to have all your ducks in a row before you sit down and start publishing things, because when we do that, it prevents us from actually taking the steps we need to make things happen. But I would say you should have an outline, and through your process, you'll begin to be able to fill in the blanks of it all, start shading it in.
Like, how do you start to create that outline? Because I think that's where
Mm.
people get really stuck with this whole concept of niching, and it feels so hard sometimes.
Yeah. I think it's a two-pronged process. One is it's a lot of self-reflection, right? You have to understand, what are your goals? Where do you want to be going? What do you want to be talking about? What do you want to make money doing? What feels resonant for you? That's the first piece of it. The second piece of it, actually, I'll say there's three pieces. The second piece of this is talking to people you've served before and the populations you've worked with, maybe people who currently follow you on social media, current patients you have. Understand what made them come to you. How did they talk to their friends about you? How did they learn about you? Right? Start getting an understanding of how you currently exist in the ecosystem, right? You might not actually be building from zero. You might have a foundation you didn't even know about, right? It's like when we used to have to convince people to be on social media 15 years ago, the conversation would always be your customers are already talking about you. You're just not part of the conversation. Somewhat similarly nowadays, as you're going on, we don't have to convince you to be there, but start figuring out, how are they talking about me when I'm going to go start joining this kind of conversation. And then I think the third piece of that is to say, go look at what your competitors are doing, right? Like, understand how they're perceiving their role in this space, understand how what their archetypes might be starting to look like, and use that to triangulate what is that for yourself, and also what are the opportunities. Is everybody talking to women 40 to 60 who are pre-diabetic? Who's talking to the women that are 61, right? Like, start playing around with that to figure out where some oceans of opportunity might be that you could capitalize on with the strengths that you have.
That's smart. And when you're talking to people, do you mean like literally setting up a Zoom with them and having a conversation or doing a survey?
I would say it's whatever works best for you and whatever you feel most comfortable with. I will say that I do think even if you are doing interviews with people in terms of like focus groups, some of those should either be done with a third party where you're not in the room, or there should be an anonymized survey component of it because you won't always get the honest answer. You get the answer you're looking for, and people can sense that. So I would say it's a healthy balance of the two because it's good to be able to have dialogue and ask follow-up questions. And sometimes seeing someone's written response versus seeing how they said it can be really informative. So it's a healthy mix of the two that I think only you can understand once you feel like you've gotten the right volume and quantity of information.
Okay. And then once you do all of this, do you create kind of like here's a cheat sheet of who we are and who we talk to, so
Mm.
that anyone on your team can have like the fast access to it?
Absolutely. What we do for a brand is we build brand guidelines, and we're talking about the same thing here. It might be a tone of voice document where you're saying, here are the words we use, here are the words we don't use. I'll say for specifically for like niching and building your avatar for who is in your niche, I always say, think about it like a baseball card. On the back of it, or a Pokemon card, what are the statistics about that person? What's the two-sentence biography at the top? And then like their age, their weight, their job, their income, their marriage status, their kid status, etc., so that everyone understands who that is within an organization and on really defined terms. And you also have that for yourself. You have that to say, this is my brand. This is how I speak. These are the topics we jump into. There should absolutely be some sort of like biblical text or totem here that everyone in the organization can come back to.
Okay.
Because if they're not empowered to, yeah, and if they're not, keep in mind, if they're not empowered to do that, if they don't have that information, you are limiting how well you can scale your business because you can't do everything. You only have 24 hours in a day. If you maintain the ownership, then just know that's fine. You're limiting your growth.
Yeah, and you have to sleep in those 24 hours.
Yes, exactly.
So you've shared some really interesting examples from your corporate world. What else, like tell us some more stories and kind of like how we can get some takeaways from them.
Yeah, I think one thing to always be thinking about is that you will develop insights from some of the least expected places and maintain openness on that journey for them. And alongside that, what I will say is that keep in mind that you can have multiple niches and different ways you reach them. So, for instance, there was a consumer packaged good brand I worked with about a year or 2 years ago now, and we had four niches within their audience. It's okay to have multiple. Through this program, through massive media, we want you to focus on that first one because everybody needs the foundational piece, and then you branch outwards from there. So we had four that we worked on, but not all of them showed up on our social media or showed up in our partnerships, right? So I'll say we had three that were a part of our social media. The fourth one was something we only did through influencer relationships. That was how we moved our brand into that space because we knew that if we owned it, there would be apprehension on the part of the folks in that niche to take on the message. There's a lot of skepticism within this particular community that we were going to have trouble overcoming. So we just said, what if we just embed the product with them? That'll be the way we prove that we are the product of that niche. We are affiliating with their messages. We are affiliating with their messengers. And so that's how we handle that. You don't have to be the name in the face of that niche. You can simply become a part of that niche's community and earn your reputation and kind of like your relationship through that, right? We always talk about marketing as a party. You're not the guy, you don't want to be the guy in the soapbox saying everything. You are a part of the conversation with others.
That's such a good point, and that's so interesting. Four niches, wow.
I would say it's really three and a half because two of them really overlapped, but at a minimum, there were definitely three distinct identities in that group.
And I should have asked you this at the very start, but how did you get into this very specific type of marketing?
It's funny. My first agency I founded in 2011, which was the year I graduated college, and our thesis was just this was a time when so many people were backing into digital that we were like, well, we could start an agency that emerges organically from it, right? Like we are the people who grew up with these technologies. Our name was Digital Natives, but like we really called ourselves the digital translators because we were kind of borderline middle millennial to geriatric millennials. We grew up with Lego sets and Connects, but we also had the Super Nintendo and the N64 in the house, so we could speak both languages fluently. Like I would argue, we were the last group to really grow grow up with a strong analog childhood component because we
Yeah.
were in middle school or high school when the internet came into our homes.
I think the term
Um,
geriatric millennial is just making me crack up. I think that's probably where I fall.
I could be wrong. We could be geriatric. I think we're like the borderline between those two. I mean, I'll be 37 in July, so that's where I sit. But so we said we can play a real role here, and we did, and successfully we were able to kind of do that over the course of 10 years until we sold the business, and that was our kind of like bread and butter of it all. And then this was a skill set we had to build over time. We expanded outwards from just doing social to being the social media guys to becoming like we are brand marketers and we can help you tell your story through the online mediums that we are experts in.
Wow. And then like how did you, because I know you've done such very interesting things, like, your involvement in the Super Bowl and then like the best-selling books, like, and then it sounds like you worked with really experts who really had their expertise really well defined. So
Mm.
how did all of that come about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny story. So, my work in this space started with Dr. David Perlmutter, the neurologist I mentioned earlier. And I love telling the story behind how that project came to be. And I used to tell it a lot when I'd lecture at universities because kids would ask me, how do I get my first client if I want to start a business? And the answer is luck. But of course, luck is sweat and hard work and a little bit of luck. But we had an intern who worked at a PR firm whose owner went to a dog park, and she was at the dog park, and someone else at the dog park said, hey, do you know any digital marketing firms? We're working on a book launch and we think we need a digital team for it. Well, here I am 15 years later, having had a successful career because of that dog park. That was how we ended up kind of getting into
That's
that project and
crazy.
growing from it. It's the funniest thing. I did like a project. I lecture at Georgetown University once a year in the executive education program. And one of the days is talking about the RFP process for agencies. And I said, and by the way, everything I just told you, this is how I got my first project. And it's a 2 sentence email. And I was like, that's all. So I was like, yes, sometimes there are RFPs and sometimes it's just like, hey, can you help?
Who being in the right place at the right time.
Exactly. It really is. It really is. That's why like sometimes you just got to be in the rooms.
Yeah. I mean, that's what
Mhm.
I personally just love building is the community of that space that we can have, the shared experience, the shared contacts.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
Uh,
And also sometimes I always find you might be speaking the same language, but until you see someone in person, you don't realize what you're actually saying to each other. And also me seeing you on a stage, you seeing me in that room helps us understand each other's strengths and weaknesses better too. And so that can give you helpful kind of feedback and insight into understanding like what's my brand position, right? There are a lot of times I've been thinking about who I am and what niche I want to have as a marketer. And it's been a third party who's seen me do something and go, that XYZ of you, that's the real thing. Like that's what you should own there because I'm sometimes too close to the material to really understand it or understand where my point of difference is.
yeah. I think maybe like what you're kind of saying too is like if it feels too easy to fall into an expertise and niche, it's not a bad thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Like that's exactly what I'm trying to hit at. Yes, you nailed it.
Yeah. Cause I know like that's how it was for me with Master the Media was like, for years and years, I was Amy, the plant-based dietitian, the spokesperson. And then I woke up one day, like around the time of COVID, and I was like, I just really love educating and teaching and like pouring into other
Mm.
people. And it's scary to totally take that leap and be like, this is what I'm doing today, not that. But it's so rewarding.
Yeah, yeah, it's scary is the right word, but then also you're stepping into your zone of genius, and that makes a world of difference. There's a saying that I heard once that I really love, which is that like you can only take up 1 square foot in the world, and some people hear that and think it's limiting, but I think it's really empowering because a square foot is territory. It's yours. You get to say you own it. It's my niche. But that square foot only has room for so many people and it only has so many borders. It only has space for so many people around you. So in the process of occupying that square foot, you're going to lose relationships, but you're also going to gain relationships. And those are the people you were supposed to be standing beside all along.
I literally just got chills. Um, I love like picturing that square foot. I love that.
I
Um,
know I'm always picturing like taking the big step and like claiming it. And then I'm like, oh, I made it.
like one of those like Hollywood stars.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you have your kind of like personal niche and your professional niche, and they're not the same necessarily.
I think I'm working definitely. I definitely have two different ones, and I'm definitely working to unite them. Like I am very much on a journey right now to really bring these two parts of myself together, and turn myself into a full masculinity and marketing consultant. Right? Like, can I be defined and be known as that person? Of here's when a brand needs someone to consult on how to healthily reach men through marketing. Here's how to do it. But yeah, I do right now. They're both over here, and that's okay. Like they're both working for me. They're doing things. I want them to be united because I believe in the power of this message and I believe in the power of this skill set. So the more I can unite them, the better. But it's okay to, I consider myself having a portfolio career. It's okay to show up differently with different pieces of myself.
I love that. So what else should listeners know about this very vast topic?
Yeah, I think the most important thing within niching, and this is going to get a little bit more into the avatar side of things and figuring out who's the person within that category, is that you need to really get into their head. I think it's really easy, and by that I mean what I see a lot of people do within Master the Media in my general career. They get really focused on the nuts and bolts of who someone is, the pain that they have, the diseases within the universe of Master Media, the diseases, the health state, etc. People are more than that. People are their jobs, people are their fears, people are their family situations, people are their mental health histories, people are their favorite movies. Like we contain multitudes. And when we only define and see people by the problem or the solution that we offer them or the thing they're dealing with, we don't actually see them. And people want to be seen as more than that. They want to be seen for the wholeness of their identity. You know, Amy, you weren't the only dietitian on the market. I'm not the only marketer on the market. And so when people come to work with us, yes, our skill set is a part of it, but it's also the relational element they've developed with us, the way that they feel we understand them and their problems better than anyone else. And that's in understanding the fullness of the person we're sitting across the table from. So I would say the most important thing is as you're developing this, like take an expansive view here. It's not just about, to go back to an example, women 40 to 50 who are pre-diabetic, but it's women 40 to 50 who are pre-diabetic, who might be thinking about retirement, who are widows, who are figuring out how to handle paying for their kid who's going to college. And it's not that you have to define the niche with all those pieces into it, but it's so that when you are starting to build your profile and what you're speaking about on social, on stages, in media, etc., you're able to mirror back to these women their own experiences, because that's when they will say, oh, it's her I want to follow. She gets me. No one is looking at the science of your information and being like, oh, that is the best science on the subject. We buy emotionally and we buy from people. We buy from people we trust. And that's bigger than just credentials. It's also that relational piece.
And so it sounds like that really comes across in how you communicate to people, and if your tone is empowering versus, hopefully it's not like degrading and making people feel bad, but like there's some platforms that do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some that exactly you kind of nailed it. Like that's exactly what I would say.
I know that's something like when we do our discovery calls for Master the Media, and that's something that like I have very diligently trained my team in. Like we are always empowering, like whether people buy or don't buy, I want them walking out of the room with us feeling empowered, feeling
Yes.
like they can take the next
Because
step.
because you also don't know who they're going to tell to buy from you. And
Exactly.
that's the feeling. I think people often forget the feeling we want people to have. It is so we are emotional animals. If we were logical animals, be a different world. And that we always used to say, like, we're not selling a bestseller, we're not selling a ROI, we are selling the experience of working with us.
Yeah. And what do you think about like, because I know there's the different kinds of buyers. There's the emotional buyers, there's like the
Hmm.
buyers who like numbers and statistics. There's, how do you, or even should you even try to speak to all of those different types of people?
It's where are you doing this conversation? I think that really matters, right? I do not think, I think social media is a place where it tends to be a little bit more emotional, especially because you're combating with algorithms. Even the people you see citing science and statistics, they're not doing it in a dry way. It's emotionally driven quantitative discussion. So I think social definitely leans more to that, but that's where you start saying like, what is the forum and who's the audience for this thing? Within businesses that I've run, it's like, okay, someone comes in and says, hey, we want a guest speaker for this topic. Well, okay, it's not just the topic, who's in the room? Does that mean I'm best situated? Should my business partner do it? Should a third business partner be responsible for that based on who we're talking to? Because the communication styles are different and our ability to deliver what an audience wants. So if you're unsure because you're working with a brand partner and you don't know who their audience is, what they look like, what approach to bring to the delivery, like ask them those questions, get that follow up, because then you can adjust your presentation style to fit who might be in the room or in the
That's a really
audience.
good point. Yeah, because you don't know who's in the room until you ask.
Right. And that makes, you'll go in giving your standard presentation, not realizing, oh, that was actually a room of physicians, and I should have led more with science than with emotion. And I have both, but I just didn't bother to check which version to call upon.
Yes, that actually makes me think of like this is like way back. So my college had like this big homecoming celebration, and one year we had a comedian, a famous comedian, come, and because my mom is a huge fan, like I'd actually seen him talk before, and he gave the exact same like spiel. And I was like, I bet he came into this crowd thinking like no one's ever like listened to me before, so I can recycle
Mhm.
content. And nope.
I'm from New York, and Chuck Schumer does that at college commencement speeches for about 30 years. And the running joke is that everybody knows the joke he's going to make and can like deliver it pitter patter.
So we have covered so much. I think this has been incredibly, incredibly helpful to our listeners. Are there any last, thoughts, tips, pieces of advice that you want to share with listeners?
Don't be afraid to define yourself. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. This process can feel scary, not because of how overwhelming it is, but because it feels weird to plant your flag. But do not be afraid of that. Planting your flag is not like a war call. It's simply like a confidence booster so that you know how to define yourself. Because if you don't do that, other people are going to define yourself for you and you'll lose control of the narrative. So, like, feel excited about this opportunity. Know that it's not derailing future opportunities. And do not look at this as a threat to what you have built, but the opportunity to reinforce like the new scaffolding for the brand that you are building.
That's incredible advice. And where can people find you online?
Yeah, so online, my website is jonathanjacobs.com, and I'm on all social media at Real John Jacobs, Jon, no H, no H, never. Real John Jacobs. Happy to have more conversations about this with anybody who has questions.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for spending this time with us today.
Oh
It's
my gosh, of course.
been really incredible. And for any of you guys who are listening, wondering what can happen when you work with brands, check out our free pricing guide at masterthemedia.co/pricing to see the honestly, shockingly, in a good way, amounts of money that brands pay when you are somebody who has a strongly defined niche who can help a brand with a strongly defined niche.